And let's go out right now to Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. She just returned from Denmark with a bipartisan congressional delegation. She sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I appreciate your time. So when the Prime Minister of Greenland says today that everyone there needs to start preparing for a possible military invasion of the territory, it's a pretty stunning thing to say. I remember being in Ukraine when those words were said. We were going around looking for bomb shelters from World War II, which of course in that case are now being used daily. You've just returned from Denmark. What did you hear there? How afraid are they? Do they really think Trump means it when he says you'll find out what I'm going to do?
Well, we have to take them seriously. We are just back. But what you just described, think of the difference here. The difference is that it was Russia, an adversary, who invaded Ukraine. For an ally to invade the sovereign territory of the Kingdom of Denmark, which includes the island of Greenland, it is insane. It makes no sense. No one should listen to Scott Bassett. He's making no sense. He's carrying water that I do not understand.
Okay, so imagine you're a member of Congress. You wake up to news that the president just launched a major military operation in Venezuela. Troops on the ground, a foreign leader captured, the United States now claiming control of the country. When did Congress authorize this? Never. Trump didn't ask, didn't consult, just acted. Before he can determine whether this constitutes a constitutional crisis, he's already moved on. Now he's putting military options on the table against Denmark, a NATO ally, over Greenland, citing national security. Meanwhile, the White House website has been updated to describe the January 6 rioters as patriotic Americans. The people who assaulted police officers have been pardoned. The official narrative now blames law enforcement for being too aggressive. 3 political firestorms, simultaneous, each one designed to overwhelm your capacity to respond to any of them.
The island of Greenland is not a possession. It's not an asset for him. They are our ally. One of the most troubling things that we heard while we were there from the Greenlandic members of parliament is that children in Greenland go to bed at night anxious, fearful, sleepless, worried that the Americans might attack them. What in God's name are we doing? We have poured away, well, we have it. The president has poured away respect and trust for our allies, and of course, respect in us. It is up to us, Congress, to reclaim that and tell the president that he is unwell in these ambitions.
The Capitol has absolutely erupted over Trump's latest moves. Democrats are furious. Some Republicans are nervous, and the whole place is in chaos, trying to figure out how to respond to a president who's simultaneously launching unauthorized military operations, threatening NATO allies, and rewriting recent history to make himself look better. This isn't one scandal. It's 3 major controversies happening at the same time. Each one individually would be enough to dominate the news cycle for weeks, but Trump dropped them all at once, creating this overwhelming sense that things are spinning out of control, and Congress has no idea how to stop it. Today, we're breaking down all 3 crises. We're talking about the Venezuela operation and why it's such a massive constitutional problem. We're discussing Trump's Greenland threats and what they mean for NATO. We're looking at the January 6th revisionism and why it's so dangerous. And we're figuring out whether Congress has any power left to check Trump, or whether he's just going to keep acting unilaterally while lawmakers fume and complain but don't actually do anything about it. Because this is one of those moments that tests whether our system of checks and balances still works. Let's start with Venezuela, because that's the most immediate crisis, and the most legally and constitutionally problematic. Trump ordered a military operation that resulted in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. American forces were involved. It happened in Venezuela's capital, and Trump announced afterward that the United States is now in charge of Venezuela. That's not some minor military engagement. That's regime change. That's overthrowing a foreign government. That's committing the United States to managing another country's political transition. And it's exactly the kind of major military action that the Constitution says requires congressional authorization. The president is commander-in-chief, yes, but Congress has the power to declare war. Courts have consistently held that this means Congress has to authorize significant military operations, especially ones that could lead to sustained conflict. But Trump didn't ask Congress for authorization. He didn't consult with congressional leaders beforehand. He didn't seek a vote after the fact. He just acted. His justification? He has inherent authority as president to protect American interests and respond to threats. His team argues that Venezuela under Maduro was a threat to regional stability, that the humanitarian crisis there was unacceptable, that removing Maduro was necessary for U.S. national security. Maybe all of that is true. Maybe there were good reasons to remove Maduro, but that doesn't mean the president can just order it without involving Congress. That's not how the Constitution works. The founders specifically gave war powers to Congress precisely to prevent presidents from unilaterally committing the country to military conflicts. They had just fought a war against a king who could start wars on his own whim. They didn't want American presidents to have that same power, so they wrote the Constitution to require congressional buy-in for war. Trump is just ignoring that. He's acting like he has unilateral authority to invade countries and overthrow governments. And here's what's scary. There's not much Congress can do to stop him. They can complain, they can hold hearings, they can pass resolutions saying Trump violated the War Powers Act. But none of that actually forces him to bring the troops home or reverse what he's done. The only real tool Congress has is to cut off funding for the operation. But that's politically toxic because it looks like you're not supporting troops who are already deployed. So Trump knows he can get away with it. He knows Congress will huff and puff, but won't actually do anything substantive, and that emboldens him to keep acting unilaterally. Representative Gregory Meeks, the top Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, said Trump's action violates international law and further undermines America's global standing. He warned that Congress must reassert its war powers role before escalation costs American lives. Meeks is right, because if Trump can do this in Venezuela, what stops him from doing it somewhere else? What if he decides Mexico isn't doing enough about drug cartels and orders an operation there? What if he decides Colombia needs regime change? Trump has already made vague threats about extending military operations to other countries if they don't cooperate with his policies. The Venezuela operation sets a precedent. It establishes that Trump thinks he can order military action anywhere without congressional authorization. If Congress doesn't push back hard, that precedent stands, and we fundamentally changed how American war powers work. While the Venezuela situation is about constitutional war powers, the Greenland situation is about Trump's relationship with allies and NATO. Trump has been publicly saying that the United States needs Greenland. He's framing it as a national security issue. Russian and Chinese activity in the Arctic means America needs to control Greenland to protect our interests. And he's putting military force on the table as an option for acquiring it. Let me repeat that. Trump is saying he might use military force to take Greenland from Denmark, a NATO ally, a democratic country, a partner that's been with America through every major conflict since World War II. He's threatening military action against them over territory, like we're living in the 1800s, when countries could just invade and annex whatever they wanted. Denmark is not backing down. Danish officials have said very clearly that Greenland is not for sale, that it's not up for negotiation, that Denmark will defend Greenland's sovereignty. They've even staged visible military operations, putting ships, planes, and troops on display to show Trump that they're serious about defending their territory. CNN reported that these operations were partly designed to demonstrate to Trump how seriously Denmark treats Greenland's defense. It hasn't deterred him. He keeps pushing. He keeps threatening. He keeps saying we need Greenland, and acting like it's just a matter of time before he gets it. He's also threatening tariffs and other economic measures against Denmark and other NATO allies if they don't cooperate. Think about that for a second. Trump is threatening military action and economic warfare against Denmark, a founding member of NATO, one of America's closest allies, a democratic country that's been our partner for decades. And he's doing it because he wants their territory. It's the kind of behavior you'd expect from a 19th century colonial power, not a 21st century democratic leader. NATO allies are watching all of this with alarm, because if Trump is willing to threaten military force against Denmark, what does that mean for the alliance? NATO is based on the principle that an attack on one member is an attack on all. But what happens if the threat comes from within the alliance? What happens if the United States, the most powerful NATO member, is threatening another member? That breaks the whole concept of collective security. It makes every NATO country wonder whether they can really count on America, or whether Trump might turn on them next if they don't give him what he wants. Trump's Greenland obsession isn't just about one island. It's about whether NATO can survive as an alliance when its leader is acting like a threat rather than a protector. And Trump is not subtle about this. He's not quietly working diplomatic channels. He's publicly threatening. He's making statements to the press. He wants everyone to know he's serious. Foreign policy experts are saying this approach is catastrophic for American alliances, because even if Trump never actually uses military force, even if this is all just bluster, the fact that he's willing to publicly threaten an ally does permanent damage. It shows that America under Trump is unpredictable, that treaties and partnerships don't mean much, that Trump values territorial acquisition over maintaining relationships, and that makes every country in the world less willing to trust America or enter into agreements with us. Because what's the point of being America's ally if Trump might threaten you tomorrow? CNN's analysis concluded that the future of both Greenland and the Western alliance is uncertain because of Trump's approach. That's a stark assessment. The Western alliance, the partnership between America and Europe that's existed since World War II, that's been the foundation of global security for 80 years, is now uncertain because Trump would rather threaten Denmark over Greenland than maintain the alliance that's kept Europe peaceful and prosperous for generations. While Trump is creating international crises with Venezuela and Greenland, he's also rewriting domestic history. The White House website now has a section about January 6th that bears no resemblance to what actually happened. It portrays the attack on the Capitol as a peaceful protest that police turned violent. It blames law enforcement for being too aggressive with tear gas and rubber bullets. It suggests that police opened doors and let people into the Capitol, implying that the rioters were invited in. And it calls the people who stormed the building patriotic Americans who were exercising their First Amendment rights. This is not a minor difference in interpretation. This is completely rewriting reality. We all watched January 6th happen live. We saw rioters break through barriers. We saw them fight with police. We saw them use weapons, bear spray, flagpoles, fire extinguishers, whatever they could find to attack officers. We saw them break windows to get into the building. We saw them hunt for lawmakers. We saw them chant about hanging Mike Pence. We saw gallows erected outside. We saw police officers being dragged into the crowd and beaten. We saw the violence and chaos and terror of that day. It's all on video. Thousands of hours of footage. And Trump is now claiming that wasn't real, that the violence was actually the fault of police for being too aggressive, that the rioters were peaceful patriots who were provoked. Trump has backed up this revisionism with action. He's pardoned or commuted the sentences of hundreds of January 6th defendants, including members of far-right militia groups like the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, including people who were convicted of assaulting police officers, including people who were found guilty of serious crimes related to the attack. Trump is letting them all out. He's wiping away their convictions. He's treating them as heroes who were wrongly persecuted for their political beliefs. And this sends a message. It tells future rioters that if you attack the Capitol in Trump's name, if you try to stop democratic processes because Trump tells you to, he'll protect you. He'll call you a patriot. He'll pardon you. There are no consequences as long as you're on Trump's side. Democrats are absolutely furious about this. They see it as Trump normalizing political violence. They see it as an attack on the legitimacy of Congress itself. They see it as preparation for future violence if Trump loses an election, faces impeachment, or gets convicted in a criminal case. Because if Trump supporters believe that attacking the Capitol is patriotic, if they believe police are the enemy and rioters are heroes, then they're more likely to resort to violence next time. That's terrifying for lawmakers who lived through January 6th, who hid in offices while rioters hunted them, who watched police officers defend them at great personal risk. Those lawmakers see Trump's revisionism as a direct threat to their safety and to the institution of Congress. Reuters published photos comparing the harrowing scenes of January 6th, officers being beaten, rioters breaking into the Capitol, with Trump's new narrative calling those same rioters patriots. The visual contrast is stark. You can't look at those images of violence and chaos and square them with Trump's claims about peaceful protest. But Trump is betting that enough people will believe his version, or at least won't care enough about the truth to push back. He's betting that he can shape reality through repetition and through using his platform to spread his preferred narrative. Let's break this down into key points, because there's a lot happening here, and we need to understand what it all means for American democracy and constitutional government. Trump is systematically undermining checks and balances. Look at what's happening across all three crises. With Venezuela, Trump is asserting that he can order major military operations without congressional authorization. With Greenland, he's claiming he can threaten NATO allies to get what he wants. With January 6th, he's rewriting history and pardoning criminals to suit his political narrative. In each case, Trump is acting like normal rules and constraints don't apply to him, like he can do whatever he wants and nobody can stop him. And the scary thing is, he's kind of right, because Congress keeps complaining but not actually using their real powers. They hold hearings but don't cut funding for unauthorized military operations. They condemn his Greenland threats but don't pass binding resolutions or impose consequences. They criticize his January 6th revisionism but don't move to impeach him over it. So Trump learns that he can push boundaries with no real consequences, and each time he does it successfully, he pushes further next time. This is how checks and balances break down, not all at once, but gradually, as one branch repeatedly oversteps and the other branches fail to push back effectively. The war powers crisis is the most constitutionally serious. Of these three issues, Venezuela is the most clear-cut violation of constitutional norms. The president is not supposed to be able to unilaterally invade countries and overthrow governments. That power belongs to Congress, and Trump just did it anyway. If Congress doesn't respond forcefully, if they don't assert their war powers authority, then they're basically ceding that authority to the president permanently, because the precedent will be set. Future presidents will point to Venezuela and say, well, Trump did it, and Congress didn't stop him, so clearly this is within presidential power now. That's how constitutional norms erode. One violation that goes unchallenged becomes the new baseline, and then the next president pushes even further. Trump's NATO threats could permanently damage American alliances. Even if Trump never actually uses military force against Denmark, even if the Greenland threats are just bluster, the damage is already done. America's allies now know that Trump is willing to threaten them if they don't give him what he wants. They know that NATO membership doesn't protect you from American coercion. They know that Trump values territorial acquisition over alliance solidarity. That changes their calculations about everything. Why invest in joint military capabilities if America might turn on you? Why share intelligence if Trump might use it against you? Why trust American security guarantees if they're conditional on giving Trump whatever he demands? Trump is destroying decades of alliance building in pursuit of Greenland. And even after he's gone, even if future presidents try to repair relationships, allies will remember this. They'll remember that America elected someone who threatened NATO partners, and that will make them more cautious about relying on America for anything critical. The January 6th revisionism is about preparing for future violence. Trump isn't rewriting January 6th history just to make himself look better. He's doing it to prepare the ground for future political violence. If his supporters believe that the January 6th rioters were patriots, if they believe attacking the Capitol is a legitimate form of political expression, then they're more likely to do it again. If Trump loses the 2028 election, or if he's convicted in a criminal case, or if he faces impeachment again, his supporters now have a model. They know what to do. They know Trump will call them patriots. They know he'll pardon them if he gets the chance. The January 6th revisionism isn't just about the past, it's about the future. It's about creating conditions where political violence becomes normalized, where attacking democratic institutions is seen as heroic rather than criminal. That's incredibly dangerous for democracy, because democracy depends on losers accepting that they lost, on peaceful transitions of power, on resolving disputes through legal processes rather than violence. Trump is systematically undermining all of that. Republicans are enablers through their silence. While Democrats are erupting over these issues, most Republicans are staying quiet or offering tepid defenses of Trump. They're not pushing back on the Venezuela operation. They're not condemning the Greenland threats. They're not challenging the January 6th revisionism. They're just letting it all happen. Their silence is enabling. If Republican members of Congress stood up and said, "This is wrong. This violates the Constitution. This damages America's interests," that would create real political pressure on Trump. It might not stop him completely, but it would constrain him. It would show there are limits to what his own party will accept. But Republicans won't do that. They're scared of Trump's base. They're scared of being primaried. They're scared of losing their seats. So they stay quiet. And Trump takes their silence as permission to keep pushing. This is how authoritarianism happens in democracies. Not through coups, but through one party deciding that protecting their leader is more important than protecting democratic institutions. Each crisis feeds into Trump's strength narrative. Trump's entire brand is built on projecting strength. He doesn't want to be seen as a normal president who works within the system. He wants to be seen as a powerful leader who breaks through obstacles and gets things done through force of will. So crises like Venezuela, Greenland, and January 6th, these aren't bugs for Trump. They're features. They demonstrate his power. They show he can do whatever he wants. They prove to his supporters that he's a strong leader who won't be constrained by rules or norms. When Democrats erupt and say Trump is violating the Constitution, Trump supporters hear that as evidence that he's shaking up the system and taking on the establishment. When NATO allies complain about Greenland threats, Trump supporters see it as Trump standing up for America. When historians and lawmakers push back on January 6th revisionism, Trump supporters believe he's telling the truth that the establishment wants to hide. Trump benefits politically from all of this chaos, even as he damages America's institutions and international standing. This is about fundamental questions of presidential power, checks and balances, alliance relationships, and shared reality. Can Congress reassert its war powers authority? Can NATO survive a president who threatens allies? Can we maintain a shared understanding of basic facts, like what happened on January 6th? The American constitutional system is built on the assumption that different branches will defend their own power, that Congress won't let presidents usurp war powers, that courts will strike down illegal actions, that political parties will prioritize the system over individual leaders. Trump is testing whether those assumptions still hold, whether Congress will actually use its power to check him, whether courts will enforce limits, whether Republicans will put country over party. So far, the system is struggling. Congress complains but doesn't act. Courts rule against Trump, but he delays and ignores. Republicans enable him rather than constraining him. At some point, we have to ask whether the system is broken, or whether it's working as designed, but people just aren't willing to use the tools available to them. These are the questions Trump is forcing us to answer by pushing everything to the breaking point, all at once. That's it for today. If you made it this far, hit that subscribe button for National Affairs Media, drop a like, and share this with someone who needs to understand what's really happening with Trump's latest moves and why they matter for democracy. We're here to give you the full picture, without the spin or the hype. Just the facts about what Trump is doing, how Congress is responding, and what it means for the future of American democracy. See you in the next one.